The story of the man who would become one of the most lethal American soldiers of the Second World War begins not on a European battlefield, but in the vast, sun-scorched fields of Texas. He was a product of a landscape that bred self-reliance, quiet determination, and a practical understanding of distance, wind, and terrain. His background was not that of a professional warrior, but of a citizen soldier, an everyman who embodied the immense, and often untapped, potential that America could muster in its hour of need. He was the unlikeliest of heroes, whose journey from a farm to a mortar platoon is a testament to the fact that courage and brilliance are not born solely on parade grounds, but in the character forged by a hard land and a simple life. The pre-war world of this Texas farmer was one of tangible realities and hard work. Life on a farm, especially in that era, was a continuous lesson in resourcefulness, mechanics, and patience. It involved understanding machinery, making do with what was on hand, and developing a profound, almost innate, sense of spatial awareness. Judging the distance to a fence line, the trajectory of a thrown tool, or the effect of the wind on a dust cloud were second nature. These were not martial skills, but they were the foundational elements of a master gunner. The farm was also a place that taught endurance. The long, grueling hours, the isolation, and the constant battle against the elements cultivated a mental fortitude and a deep-seated resilience that would prove far more valuable on the battlefield than any pre-existing knowledge of military doctrine. He was, in essence, being prepared for a war he did not yet know existed. When the United States entered the global conflict after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the call to arms was answered by millions of such men. They were not the hardened veterans of a foreign legion, they were mechanics, teachers, factory workers, and farmers. The story of his enlistment and basic training is a microcosm of the entire American war effort, a massive, hurried, and often chaotic transformation of civilians into soldiers. He would have undergone the standard, rigorous process that stripped away his civilian identity and replaced it with the discipline of the U.S. Army. He learned to march, to shoot an M1 Garand, to follow orders, and to function as part of a unit. It was a world away from the solitary, independent life of the farm. It was during this training pipeline that his particular assignment was determined, the mortar platoon. In the vast and complex machinery of an infantry division, the mortar is a unique tool. It is not a direct-fire weapon like a rifle or a machine gun. It is an indirect-fire system, a weapon of geometry and physics. Its projectiles are lobbed high into the air to fall almost vertically on an enemy that the crew cannot see. Mastering it requires a different kind of mind, one that is patient, meticulous, and capable of abstract thought. It demands an understanding of mathematics, map reading, and the subtle effects of weather. It is the sniper rifle of the artillery world, and it requires a craftsman, not just a trigger puller. Why was this Texas farmer chosen for this role? Perhaps a keen-eyed instructor noticed his calm demeanor, his methodical approach to problems, or his aptitude for the calculations involved. Perhaps it was simply the needs of the army, a random assignment that, by chance or fate, placed him in the one role where his particular, farm-honed talents could flourish to their absolute, terrifying potential. The mortar, with its arc of fire, its reliance on judgment and estimation, and its requirement for steady nerves under pressure, was the perfect instrument for this man. The skills of judging the lay of the land, of understanding wind and distance, of making precise adjustments, all cultivated over a lifetime in Texas, were about to be applied with lethal consequence on the other side of the world. Thus, the unlikeliest of heroes was forged. The quiet farmer was gone, replaced by a soldier in the 3rd Infantry Division. He was no longer an individual working the soil, but a part of a crew, a platoon, a division. He and his 3 comrades formed a team around a simple, yet brutally effective, weapon, the M1 81mm mortar. They were not glamorous tankers or daring paratroopers, they were infantrymen in a supporting arm, often overlooked in the grand narratives of war. They did not charge forward, they set up, calculated, and fired from positions behind the front lines. Yet, it was in this precise, technical, and unglamorous role that this Texan was about to demonstrate that a single man, armed with the right weapon and an unparalleled mastery of his craft, could alter the dynamics of a battlefield and achieve the impossible. The stage was set not for a story of blind rage, but of cold, calculated, and devastatingly efficient application of force. By the winter of 1945, the tide of the Second World War in Europe had seemingly turned irrevocably against Nazi Germany. The Allies had broken out of Normandy, liberated Paris, and were pressing toward the German border. In the east, the Soviet steamroller was advancing relentlessly. Yet, in the picturesque, vine-covered region of Alsace, along the frozen banks of the Rhine, a brutal and unexpected chapter of the war was unfolding, a last, desperate gasp of the German war machine that would become known as the Colmar Pocket. This was not a war of sweeping armored maneuvers, it was a grinding, bloody stalemate fought in conditions so abominable they defied human endurance. It was into this frozen hell that the Texas farmer and his mortar crew were thrust, a cauldron of fire and ice where their unique skills would be tested against a fanatical and cornered enemy. The Colmar Pocket was a geographical and strategic anomaly. As the U.S. 7th Army and French 1st Army pushed northward through Alsace after Operation Dragoon, the German 19th Army, though battered, had managed to anchor its flanks on the Rhine River and the fortified Vosges Mountains. This created a salient, or pocket, of German-held territory projecting west of the Rhine around the city of Colmar. This pocket was a dagger aimed at the flank of the advancing Allies. For Adolf Hitler, it was a matter of prestige and strategy. He declared the city of Colmar a fortress to be held at all costs, funneling reinforcements and ordering a fight to the death. For the Allies, particularly the French forces under General Jean de Lattre de Tassigny, it was an ulcer that had to be cauterized. The presence of a significant German force on the west bank of the Rhine threatened any further advance into Germany itself. The battle for the Colmar Pocket was fought in what veterans would later describe as the most brutal conditions of the entire Western Front. The winter of 1944-45 was one of the most severe in European memory. Temperatures plummeted far below freezing, coating the idyllic Alsatian countryside in a deceptively beautiful, yet deadly, layer of ice and snow. Men fought in deep snowdrifts, their weapons freezing solid if not constantly tended. The cold was a merciless, omnipresent enemy, causing rampant cases of frostbite and trench foot. The ground was iron-hard, making it nearly impossible to dig proper foxholes or emplacements. The landscape was a flat, open plain, broken only by small, bitterly contested villages and skeletal orchards, offering little cover from enemy observation or fire. It was a sniper's paradise and an infantryman's nightmare. The German forces defending the pocket were a mix of battered but experienced Wehrmacht units and Waffen-SS divisions, stiffened by fanatical Nazi loyalists who knew they were fighting on German-held soil. Alsace had been annexed by Germany in 1940. They were dug into fortified villages and farmhouses, with excellent fields of fire across the open ground. They had pre-registered artillery and mortar positions, and they were fighting a desperate defensive battle. This was not the war of 1940, the German army in the Colmar Pocket was cornered, and a cornered animal is at its most dangerous. They launched vicious local counterattacks, supported by what remained of their armor, including the formidable Panther and Tiger tanks. These steel behemoths, though hampered by fuel shortages, were terrifyingly effective in the defensive role, their long-range guns picking off Allied armor and infantry positions with impunity. It was against this backdrop of stalemate and suffering that the American forces, including the 3rd Infantry Division, were committed to the fight. The division, known as the Rock of the Marne, was a veteran unit, but nothing had prepared them for the horrors of the Colmar Pocket. The American infantryman found himself advancing across snow-covered fields into a storm of machine gun fire, pre-sighted mortar barrages, and the devastating fire of hidden tanks. Progress was measured in yards, and each small village or wood line was taken at a tremendous cost in blood. The cold sapped strength, morale, and the will to fight. This was a battle of attrition in its purest, most horrific form. In this static, lethal environment, the value of indirect fire weapons became paramount. Artillery and mortars were the kings of the battlefield. Direct assaults on German positions were often suicidal, but a well-placed mortar or artillery barrage could soften up defenses, silence a machine gun nest, or break up an infantry assault. It was here that the 81mm mortar crew found its terrible purpose. The flat, open terrain of the Colmar Pocket provided perfect observation for indirect fire. A skilled mortar crew, positioned safely behind the American front lines, could rain destruction down on German positions that were impervious to rifle fire. The mortar was an area weapon, but in the hands of a master, it could achieve near-pinpoint accuracy. The stage was set. The Texas farmer and his three-man crew were no longer just another weapon in the division's arsenal. In the frozen hell of the Colmar Pocket, where movement was costly and every enemy position was a fortress, their ability to precisely and relentlessly place high-explosive rounds on target would become one of the few tools that could effectively, and systematically, dismantle the German defense, one tank, one machine gun nest, one strongpoint at a time. The desperate stand had found its most unlikely and deadly answer. In the symphony of destruction that defined the World War II battlefield, each instrument had its part. The rifle provided the sharp staccato, the machine gun a sustained, brutal rhythm, and the artillery the earth-shattering crescendo. The 81mm mortar, however, was the subtle, deadly woodwind, a weapon that could deliver a sudden, piercing note of high explosives from above, often without warning. For the Texas farmer and his crew, the M181mm mortar was not merely a tool, it was an extension of their own senses and skills, a complex yet brutally simple system that, when mastered, became one of the most feared and effective infantry weapons of the war. To understand the incredible feat of destroying 258 armored vehicles, one must first understand the instrument that made it possible. The M181mm mortar was a masterpiece of pragmatic design, a middleweight champion that filled a critical gap between the handheld 60mm mortar and the heavier, less mobile 107mm and 4.2-inch models. The entire system broke down into three-man portable components, a feature that granted it the mobility so crucial in the fluid and often roadless conditions of the Colmar Pocket. The heart of the weapon was the smoothbore muzzle-loading tube, or barrel, weighing approximately 45 pounds. Its base was the bipard, a sturdy two-legged assembly that provided stability and contained the crucial elevating and traversing mechanisms, allowing for fine adjustments in the vertical and horizontal planes. Anchoring the system was the heavy, rectangular baseplate, which weighed around 45 pounds. This plate served to absorb the massive recoil forces, distributing them into the ground and preventing the weapon from digging itself into the earth with each shot. In action, the three components were assembled in minutes, the baseplate was set, the bipard legs straddled it, and the tube was locked into the bipard's yoke. The genius of the mortar lay in its indirect fire capability. Unlike a rifle or a machine gun, which required a direct line of sight to the target, the mortar fired its projectile in a high, arcing trajectory. This allowed it to engage enemies hidden behind cover, on reverse slopes, or entrenched in buildings, the very essence of the German defense in the Colmar Pocket. The firing process was a carefully choreographed ballet of physics and procedure. The first step was target acquisition. This could come from a forward observer, who would radio back coordinates, or from the crew themselves using a map and compass. The key piece of equipment was the M for sight unit, which was mounted on the bipard. This sight allowed the gunner to precisely align the mortar on a specific azimuth, direction, and set the elevation, angle, which determined the range. The ammunition was what gave the mortar its teeth. The standard round was the M43A1 high-explosive HE round. It was an ogive-shaped projectile, a little over a foot long, weighing roughly 7 pounds. The business end was filled with TNT or a similar explosive, while the back end, known as the fin assembly, contained a stabilizer and the propellant. The propellant was divided into increments, small, horseshoe-shaped bags of gunpowder called charges that were clipped onto the fin assembly's tail. To fire, a crewman would carefully drop the round, fin first, down the mouth of the tube. The projectile would slide down until a fixed firing pin at the bottom of the tube struck a primer in the base of the round, igniting the primary charge and the attached increments. The expanding gases would then launch the mortar bomb on its high, parabolic journey. The range was controlled by both the elevation of the tube and the number of propellant charges used. More charges meant higher pressure and a longer range. But a weapon is only as effective as its crew, and the four-man mortar squad was a tightly knit team where each member's life depended on the other's proficiency. The gunner was the artist, the man responsible for setting up the mortar, using the sight to lay their weapon for direction and elevation, and making the minute adjustments based on the fall of shot. This was the role of the Texas farmer, a position demanding an almost supernatural feel for distance, wind, and trajectory, skills honed by a lifetime of judging throws and shots on the farm. The assistant gunner stood ready to support the gunner, helping with the initial lay and prepared to take over if the gunner became a casualty. He was also responsible for feeding rounds to the ammunition bearer. The ammunition bearer, often the biggest and strongest man in the crew, was the workhorse. He prepared the rounds by setting the correct number of charges, removed the safety wires, and handed them to the squad leader, who would double-check the settings and drop them down the tube. The squad leader was the brain, communicating with command, receiving fire missions, and directing the crew's actions. In the static, frozen hell of the Colmar Pocket, this crew and their weapon found their ultimate expression. The M1 was not a weapon for destroying tanks in a direct duel, that was a task for specialized anti-tank guns or tanks themselves. Its primary role was anti-personnel. However, in the hands of a gunner with an intuitive grasp of his weapon's capabilities, its high-explosive shell could be employed with devastating effect against even armored vehicles. A direct hit on the thinner top armor of a German tank, the deck, engine compartment, or turret roof, could cripple or destroy it. A near miss could blow off a tank's track, immobilizing it and making it a sitting duck for other anti-tank assets. It could also eliminate the supporting infantry that was crucial for protecting those tanks from close-in attacks. The legend of the Texas farmer was not born from a single, miraculous shot, but from the relentless, precise, and systematic application of this deceptively simple weapon, turning the M181mm mortar from an area suppression tool into the most feared tank hunting implement on the Colmar battlefield. The legend was not born in a single, cinematic moment, but was forged in the relentless, grinding tempo of a battle that seemed to have no end. It was a feat that defied conventional military logic, a testament to what could be achieved when a master craftsman was given the perfect tool for the conditions and the freedom to apply his skill with cold, relentless precision. The story of the Texas farmer and his three-man crew taking down 258 German armored vehicles is not a tale of a lone hero with a rifle, but a symphony of destruction conducted by a virtuoso gunner, with his mortar as the instrument and the frozen plains of the Colmar Pocket as his stage. The tactical situation created a perfect, if horrifying, killing zone. The German forces, constrained within the pocket and desperate to hold their ground, launched repeated counterattacks against the advancing American and French lines. These attacks, often spearheaded by panzers and Sturmgeschütz self-propelled assault guns, followed predictable routes across the open, snow-covered fields. The terrain offered the German armor little cover, making them visible for miles. Conversely, the American mortar crew, expertly dug in and camouflaged, was virtually invisible from the German lines. They operated from a fixed, pre-registered position, a fact that allowed the gunner to develop an intimate, almost instinctual knowledge of his battlefield. He knew the exact range to every prominent tree line, road junction, and ditch, the very avenues the German armor was forced to use. The process was methodical, a chillingly efficient drill honed by countless repetitions. When a German armored column was spotted, the information would be relayed to the crew. The gunner, the Texas farmer, would not wait. He understood the calculus of indirect fire. Time was the enemy. While the lead German tank was still thousands of yards away, he would begin his work. Using his pre-calculated data, he would lay the mortar for the estimated point of contact. The sight was set, the elevation and azimuth dialed in with meticulous care. The assistant gunner and ammunition bearer would prepare the rounds, ensuring the correct number of propellant charges were attached. The squad leader would confirm the target and give the fire command. The first round was a spotter. The gunner, often acting as his own observer, would watch for the round's impact through binoculars. The sound of the tube's distinctive thump was followed by a tense pause, then the distant crump of the explosion. He was not aiming to hit a moving tank with this first shot, that was a matter of near impossible luck. He was walking his fire onto the target area, using the splashes of snow and dirt to gauge his adjustment. His farm-honed sense of spatial judgment came into play here, judging the wind by the way it blew the snow, estimating the range by the size of the explosion, and feeling the subtle drop in temperature that could affect the round's flight. He would then call out corrections in a calm, steady voice, right 10, at 50. The crew would adjust the traversing and elevating mechanisms, the metallic clicks a prelude to the next round. Then the real destruction began. With the range and deflection confirmed, the crew would begin firing for effect. The rhythm was everything. A well-drilled crew could maintain a sustained rate of fire of up to 18 rounds per minute for short periods. The rounds would soar high into the grey winter sky, their trajectory a silent, invisible arc of death. From the German perspective, the attack would descend into chaos without warning. High-explosive shells began raining down from directly above, exploding amidst the armored column. The M43A1 round was not designed as a dedicated anti-tank weapon, but its effects on armored vehicles in the open were catastrophic. A direct hit on the thin upper hull or engine deck of a Panther, Panzer IV, or Sturmgeschütz could penetrate, igniting fuel and ammunition in a catastrophic explosion. Shrapnel from near misses would shred the rubber-rimmed road wheels, immobilizing the vehicle. More critically, the mortar barrage was devastating to the supporting Panzergrenadiers, the infantry essential for protecting the tanks from close assault teams. Without infantry, the armored vehicles became blind and vulnerable, forced to button up their hatches and retreat or be picked off by other American anti-tank assets. The psychological impact of this invisible, plunging fire was as destructive as the physical damage. Tank crews, trained to face threats they could see, were unnerved by an enemy that struck from the zenith. There was no muzzle flash to locate, no trajectory to trace back to its source. It was death delivered from the empty sky, an impersonal, relentless hammering that could destroy a vehicle and its crew without ever showing itself. The constant, unpredictable barrage disrupted German attacks before they could even gain momentum, breaking up formations and sowing confusion and terror. Day after day, through the brutal cold and falling snow, the four-man crew repeated this process. They fought not with rage, but with the detached focus of tradesmen performing a grim, necessary job. The gunner's mind became a living fire direction computer, his hands making infinitesimal adjustments on the sight that translated into obliteration a mile away. The number of destroyed vehicles climbed, not through a single, epic stand, but through the accumulated result of dozens of separate, meticulously executed fire missions. 20, then 50, then 100. The legend grew among the American infantry, who knew that when the mortars spoke, the German armor would suffer. By the time the Colmar Pocket was finally crushed and the Rhine was reached, the tally had reached an almost unbelievable 258. It was a number that spoke not of a superhuman feat, but of the ultimate expression of skill, terrain, and weaponry fused into one devastatingly effective whole. For men, with a simple tube and a pile of bombs, had held an armored division at bay. The story of the Texas farmer and his mortar crew did not end with the silencing of the guns in the Colmar Pocket. It transcended the immediate tactical victory, hardening into a legend that would ripple through the U.S. Army and redefine the very perception of the mortar's role in modern warfare. His feat was more than a record of destruction, it was a paradigm shift, a demonstration of how a weapon of area effect could be transformed, through sheer mastery, into an instrument of surgical precision. He became, in the annals of military history, the sniper of the artillery world, a title that captured the essence of his cold, calculated, and devastatingly effective method. In the aftermath of the war, as the Army compiled its after-action reports and analyzed what had worked, the story of this single crew's staggering tally became a subject of intense study and awe. The official number, 258 armored vehicles destroyed or immobilized, was so far beyond the expected performance of an 81mm mortar section that it demanded a new way of thinking. The U.S. Army recognized his actions with the award of the Distinguished Service Cross, the nation's second highest award for valor, a testament to the strategic impact of his actions. But his true legacy was not encapsulated in a medal citation, it was embedded in the training manuals and the ethos of the mortar teams that followed. He had proven that the mortar was not merely a support weapon for harassing enemy infantry or providing smoke screens. In the right hands, it was a primary tank killer in defensive operations, a tool that could dominate a battlefield by controlling the avenues of approach with pre-registered, lethal fire. This legacy fundamentally altered the perception of the mortar crew. No longer were they seen as just another infantry asset, often relegated to a secondary role behind machine guns and rifles. Their sniper of the artillery world analogy was perfect. Like a sniper, his effectiveness was not based on volume of fire, but on patience, observation, and the single, well-aimed shot. Like a sniper, he used terrain and concealment to remain hidden while delivering death from an unexpected angle. And like a sniper, his psychological impact was disproportionate to his numbers. He had shown that a mortar crew could be a strategic asset, a force multiplier that could blunt an armored assault and break the enemy's will before they even made contact with the main line. This new perception elevated the status of the mortar men, instilling in them a pride and a recognition of the immense destructive potential they wielded. The tale also serves as a powerful counterpoint to the dominant narrative of technological superiority in World War II. The German war machine was renowned for its sophisticated, if often over-engineered, wonder weapons, the Tiger II tank, the Me-262 jet fighter, the V-2 rocket. The American response often involved its own industrial and technical might, the vast numbers of Sherman tanks, the P-51 Mustang, the atomic bomb. Yet, the story of the Texas farmer is a profound reminder of the enduring, and sometimes decisive, value of human skill. He did not have a technological advantage. He used a standard issue M181mm mortar, a weapon found in every infantry regiment. His advantage was his mind. It was his farm-honed understanding of physics and geometry, his preternatural patience, and his ability to remain calm under pressure that transformed a commonplace weapon into a legendary one. It is a story that argues that the most potent weapon on any battlefield is not the machine, but the man who masters it. Furthermore, his legacy is one of the citizen soldier, a cornerstone of the American military tradition. He was not a graduate of West Point, he was not a career military man. He was a farmer who answered his nation's call. His story embodies the idea that within the ranks of a free society lies a vast reservoir of untapped talent and potential. The same skills that made him successful in civilian life, mechanical aptitude, spatial awareness, and a steadfast work ethic, when channeled through military training and discipline, could produce a soldier of unparalleled effectiveness. He was the ultimate proof that valor and genius are not the exclusive domain of a professional warrior class, but can be found in the most unassuming of men. Today, the story of the Texas farmer who took on an armored division with a mortar is more than just a remarkable anecdote from a world war. It is a timeless lesson. It is a lesson for military thinkers on the power of tactical innovation and the need to empower junior leaders and specialists. It is a lesson on the importance of mastering the fundamentals, for it is in the mastery of the basics that true genius emerges. And for a wider audience, it remains one of the most compelling and human stories of the war, a narrative not of faceless armies clashing, but of one man, with his small team and a simple weapon, achieving the impossible through courage, intellect, and an unshakable will. His legacy is not just etched in the steel of 258 destroyed German tanks, but in the very understanding of what is possible when human potential is fully realized in the face of overwhelming odds.